Hello guys and gals, and welcome. So Diablo 4 beta is over, and we've gotten a lot of information from it. And one of the things that I harvested from the Diablo 4 beta was the Codex of Power Entries. So we have a lot of Codex of Power Entries, and I've got them separated into 6 different categories. The classes, of course, so there's going to be one for each class, so Rogue, Druid, Necromancer, Barbarian, etc. Specifically, though, this one is the non-class based aspects of power. So this is the Codex of Power. Now, it is important to note that Codex of Power is not the only effects within the game, and there are legendaries that can be found that have legendary effects that you will not find within the Codex. And it is also important to point out that the Codex of Power entries are the lowest possible roll of that legendary power. So if you were to find a legendary item in the wild, so to speak, there is a very good chance it could be more powerful than the Codex entries. And there are very few exceptions to this, because there are some legendary powers that seem to be a little bit better when they are a little lower than if they are higher, but it's neither here nor there. So just keep in mind that the Codex entries are going to be the lowest of the lot. And we're going to go over all of the non-class specific Codex entries right now. The first one, of course, is the one that's up on the screen, is the Aspect of Disobedience, which is you gain 0.25% increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 25%. Now, it is important to note that armor in Diablo 4 not only affects how you mitigate physical damage, it also provides you with a bonus to your elemental damage at a reduced rate. So having a 25% increase to your armor value is going to make you a lot more tanky, not just in your physical reduction, but also your elemental reduction as well. The next one on the list is the Aspect of the Intercom. The Aspect of the Intercom is deal 3% increased damage for each second you stand still, up to 30%. Now, we've seen similar ones to these, like in Diablo 3, but basically what it is you'll see like an actual buff start to count up on your little bar down here. I actually think I have it on my bar right now. And once it hits 30%, you're at your max. And then as you move, it will start to go down. So you have to actually stand still to gain this effect. And there are plenty of characters that stand still all the time. However, we also have to move to dodge effects, and especially if you're in a boss fight and they're putting puddles under your feet. So the usefulness of this may or may not be, for you. Next on the list is the Aspect of Might. This one is basic skills grant 25% damage reduction for 4 seconds. Basic skills would be your generators, your lowest skills on your tree, essentially. So as long as you're using a basic skill, you're getting a 25% damage reduction for 4 seconds, and I'm assuming that you can spam that, essentially, right? So you just constantly have a very nice 25% damage reduction as long as you are attacking. If you're not using your basic skills, though, like if you have some sort of advanced setup where you don't necessarily have to use your basic skills, well then, not really for you. Next on the list is the Aspect of Retribution. Distant enemies have 15% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds. When they hit you, you deal 30% increased damage to stunned enemies. Now, I actually had to look this up and figure out exactly what the hell a distant enemy is. And I managed to find a tooltip by Blizzard themselves. And basically what it says is close enemies are those who are in melee range, and distant enemies are those who are outside of melee range. So any monster that is outside of melee range, which melee range is pretty close. I mean, even if you consider, like in Diablo 2, like a 5-range polearm, like something like a freaking Vecta Corbin or a Great Poleaxe that has the longest range in the game, every single monster outside of that distance has a 15% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds, and you deal 30% increased damage to stunned enemies. So this is a pretty powerful one, in my opinion, because if you are not a melee character, if you're not in there constantly, this can be a extremely good defensive mechanic for you. Next on the list is the aspect of shared misery. This one is Lucky Hit. When you hit a crowd-controlled enemy, there is up to a 30% chance for that crowd-controlled enemy to spread to another unaffected enemy. Now, crowd controls seem to be pretty much anything that slows down an enemy or causes some sort of crowd-controlling effect, and that's actually really powerful. So if you are going for a crowd control style build, this could be one that you definitely do not want to miss out on, because it could potentially allow you to basically turn your crowd control into an infectious crowd control. Next on the list is the aspect of the deflecting barrier, and I was playing around with this one in my head, and it seemed pretty powerful to me too. This one is, while you have a barrier active, so if you are a character that constantly has barriers active, then this might be for you. There's a 20% chance to ignore incoming direct damage from distant enemies. So again, back to the distant enemy thing, any monster that's not within melee range, you have a 20% chance to just deflect the attack, which is pretty damn powerful in my opinion. Of course, you have to have a barrier up for this to be active, so unlike the other one, which just stuns monsters that are not within melee range of you, this one does require you to maintain a barrier to gain the effect. Next on the list is the aspect of the expectant. Attacking enemies with a basic skill increases the damage of your next core skill cast by 5% up to 50%. So this would be for somebody who is constantly swapping back and forth between their basic and core skills. So you obviously, if you have a very nice basic skill and you've been using that a lot, and then you have a very nice core skill as well, you're going to utilize this to enhance the damage of your core skill. So that should work out pretty nicely with a nice 50% bonus there. Next on the list is the aspect of the protector. Damaging an elite enemy grants you a barrier, absorbing 315 damage for 10 seconds. This effect can only happen once every 30 seconds. So this could be maybe used in combination with the other one that requires a barrier. But basically what this does is it just gives you a nice little barrier that will absorb some damage. It's not always up, but it's up a lot, and it will definitely make you a little tankier. I actually use this on pretty much all my characters because it was just something that was very prevalent and also very easy to add into a build because it fit into a lot of different slots. We also have aspect of the umbral. Restore one of your primary resource when you crowd control an enemy. So again, back to the crowd controlling effects. If you were to combine aspect of the umbral with the other one that we were looking at earlier, which was basically the infectious crowd control effects, you could potentially restore your primary resource almost indefinitely with this, depending on how many monsters there are and how well the crowd controlling infectiousness works. Next on the list is the aspect of the edgemaster. Edgemaster's aspect. Skills deal up to 24% increased damage based upon your available primary resource when cast, receiving the maximum benefit when you have full primary resource. Now, I actually use this on my Trapsin, my rogue trapper, because she never used any resources. She was very specifically using traps, and the traps were not using her resource, and so she didn't need it, and so her resource was always full, which meant that I would get a nice little bonus damage to all my traps, because I was constantly at the maximum benefit for this particular effect. Next on the list is the eluding aspect. Becoming injured while crowd controlled grants you unstoppable for 4 seconds. This effect has a 40-second cooldown. Now, I do believe I actually found out exactly what injured meant, and it's not here. I believe injured, when I found out, it was basically that you were below 35% HP. Which I can pull that up later, but I'm pretty sure that you have to be at a certain low HP number, technically, because healthy is 85%, and I'm pretty sure injured was 35%. So once you drop below a certain amount of HP on your character, you gain the unstoppable effect for 4 seconds. So basically, you're going to kind of like get out of whatever trouble you're in for that duration, but it does have a 40-second cooldown, so you can only gain this effect once every 40 seconds, which might make it a little less useful than you would think. Maybe good for PvP to get out of somebody's trap. Next is the Ghost Walker aspect, which is while unstoppable and for 2 seconds after you gain 10% increased movement speed, you can move freely through enemies. So moving freely through enemies is definitely going to be useful because if you're stuck in the middle of a bunch of monsters, you can get out. And then, of course, the unstoppable effect is very nice for basically removing crowd controls. So if you gain the unstoppable effect, it will also make it so that you can move through enemies, which might be necessary for you to survive certain encounters, depending on how many monsters there are. And then we also have the Needle Flare aspect, which is going to be a very popular one for the Thorns builds. If you guys haven't seen that pretty popular Thorns Barbarian build that's been floating around, this one would definitely add in very nicely to the Thorns Bar build because it gives you the damage. The Thorns damage dealt has a 20% chance to deal damage to all enemies around you. So if you've got a massive amount of Thorns damage, this is just going to give you the ability to proc that Thorn damage on everything around you, which honestly sounds amazing for a Thorns build. Next is the Rapid aspect. Basic skills gain 23% attack speed. That's really nice if you're spamming your basic skills a lot. And then we also have the last one, which is Wind Strikers aspect. Critical strikes grant 8% movement speed for 1 second up to 6 seconds. So if you are a heavy crit striker, you could maybe get your extra movement speed here. Not exactly sure what the cap is on movement speed, but I would assume that eventually you would reach some sort of cap. Now, that's all for the non-class specific Codex of Power entries. As I said before, there are probably some more that are not in the Codex of Power, but these are only the ones that you can gain through the Codex basically very easily. Stay tuned to my channel because I will be putting out a video on all the class-specific ones as well. There are some very specific class-only aspects in the Codex of Power for the Rogue, the Barbarian, the Druid, the Necromancer, and the Sorceress. So we'll be looking at those as well. As always, thanks for watching, and keep watching.